My name's John Lyon and I teach in the English department at the University of Bristol, but I'm principal investigator of the AHRC funded Penguin Archive project.
My name's Joanna Pryor and I'm the Managing Director of the Penguin General Division, which is one of 3 adult divisions at Penguin today here in London.
The Penguin Archive is the record of Penguin's history. It is by any measure a vast archive, and it's also not controversial to say that it's the archive of the most important publisher in history.
The Penguin Archive at Bristol University is a fantastic resource for Penguin today. We feel very lucky that it is there, and it's something that we can refer to in our sort of daily lives, in our daily working lives. But it's also something that we can point journalists to if they want to write about us, that researchers, academics and so on have got access to this wonderful kind of range of historical documents and first editions of individual books. So we use the archive quite a lot for inspiration. We use it when we're thinking about our heritage particularly. So for marketing ideas or design ideas, we can go down to Bristol and see what's there and dig around and see what things were done in the past.
I'm Hannah Lowry, I'm the archivist at the University of Bristol Penguin Archive. One of the core things that we do is look after the books in the archives which are in our care. The funding has allowed us to concentrate mainly on documents relating to the history of Penguin, people involved in Penguin, anniversaries of Penguin, cover design, that sort of thing. But we've also worked on the editorial things. We've got lots and lots of boxes of archives. So here, for instance, I've got a file relating to Ernest Hemingway's A Farewell to Arms. One of our key collections are the editorial files, which are a file relating to each book, and that would include things like correspondence between the author and the editor. This box here includes the editorial files for the first 10 Penguins published in 1935. Because we do get readers from all over the world, they get a much better idea of what is actually here before they come.
There's something about the history of Penguin that tells you about Britain's cultural life during the 20th century. And the fact that Penguin had a sort of involvement and a take on the war, for example. There would be things you could find out about British history generally from looking at the archive. So it's not just about the history of a particular company. I think it's has a broader appeal than that.
Undoubtedly, we can show that Penguin is shaping British attitudes in the run-up to the Second World War, particularly in its hostility to appeasement and appeasement of Hitler and the Nazis. Penguin is getting into the pockets of the troops during the Second World War and asking questions such as, what do you want from the next government? The other thing that we're being allowed to do is to raise consciousness about the archive in the academic community through conferences, international conferences, a big conference just coming up, 3-day conference, but also involving the general public through Penguin Days and getting them to come and tell us their Penguin stories.
My name's Shannon Altman and I love reading. I love Penguin books. Because Penguins are the people's books, they don't kind of overload you with footnotes. So the reason I like reading Penguin is because it's quite complex as it is, but you don't have to read it in a scholarly way. You can just read it for enjoyment.
The value of the archive to the general public is that this is the archive of a publisher whose concern was with the general public and who educated the general public. So in some sense, this is the great democratic archive.
As far as I'm aware, anybody can access the Penguin Archive, which is really good because people normally feel quite intimidated about, going into an academic environment and finding out about academic topics. But it's friendly, it's easily accessible, anybody can use it, and I think a massive range of people do use it.
We're not merely preserving and making the archive available, we're actually trying to expand that archive and enrich it. And the other obvious enduring achievement of the archive is the research that the project people are doing at different stages, from PhD to people who are established in the academic world.
I'm Dean Blackburn. I'm a PhD student on the Penguin Archive project, and I'm interested in, I suppose, the politics of Penguin Books, into the significance of Penguin Books in 20th century British history. The Penguin Archive is hugely important in the history of Penguin Books, partly because of how vast it is, the amount of material that is in the archive. Almost a full collection of every book that Penguin has published is in there. There's an editorial file for most of these titles that tells you about the flow of ideas that led to the production of these books. And I think that the reason that this material is important is because it really shows how Penguin was engaging or interacting with a wider world, and why Penguin's story is not just important to the history of British publishing, but also important to the history of British culture and British society. The AHRC funding has allowed me not only to be part of a really interesting research project independently, but it's also allowed me to be part of a broader research community. Aside from the research, the funding has also allowed me to take part in further dissemination work, whether it be presenting paper at our own international conference or having the opportunity to teach undergraduates.
Because of our wonderful heritage, at Penguin we think a lot about the future as well as the past and trying to connect the two things up. And we're very keen that the archive at Bristol continues to be fed by Penguin's kind of contemporary work.
AHRC funding has been hugely important to myself personally. I certainly couldn't have pursued an academic career if it wasn't for AHRC funding. I struggled to self-fund my master's degree and thought that would be it for me in postgraduate study. So when I was able to get AHRC funding, it has opened a lot of doors as far as my career is concerned. So I certainly think the AHRC is hugely important to the postgraduate community.
I have seen the AHRC publicised in the posters and everything, so I do know that without them, the events, the conferences and the research probably wouldn't be possible.
The AHRC has brought a lot of rigour and expertise to the archive that wasn't there before. Until we had an organisation and funding to sort of dedicate themselves to the archive, there were just lots of dusty boxes with all the papers hidden away. Now we have an opportunity to really sort of show the history to the general public. We've unearthed lots of stories, and there is a sense that if you want to, you can discover things about British history, about the development of writers and literature and culture during the second half of the 20th century. And that's really down to all the work that's been going on in the archive in Bristol.
In terms of the enduring impact of AHRC funding for this project and the legacy that this project will leave, I think the hope is that eventually there will be a permanent Penguin Research Centre in the city of Bristol, because Penguin has its origins with Alan Lane, a Bristolian, and it's a great story to tell.